Now. Okay.
All right, good evening and welcome to the Town of Brighton Conservation Board, September 8th, 2020. I'll open, do we have a public forum? Anyone who wants to speak or no? Okay, I'll ask for an approval of the minutes from the August 11th, 2020 meeting. Your motion.
So moved. I move we approve them.
Second.
All right, approve the minute.
All those approved? All those in favor? Anybody in deny? All minutes are
All
approved.
right, thank you. We'll come back to the tree removals. The first project review we have is 9P01-20, application of Nicholas Leonardo for site plan modification, woodlot EPOD permit modification to remove additional trees for the purpose of constructing a new house on property located west of the intersection of Clover Street and Greenaway Road. And there it is for us to see. All right.
Brett, could you bring up the site plan for that?
Yeah, one moment.
Yes.
And do we have anybody in the audience to speak to this application? If you could raise your hand if you are out there to speak in regard to this application. Doesn't look like there is anybody, so let me just kind of give you guys a brief overview.
Members, comments?
Let me just give a brief overview. So we've seen this application a few times for construction of a new house at basically the corner of Clover Street, Greenaway. It is in an EPOD, woodlot EPOD district. Originally, you can kind of see the limits of disturbance, which was set by the siltation fencing around the backside of the house, and a number of trees were coming down in regards to that construction. Now, beyond that limits of disturbance, you see many more trees that are being proposed to be removed, which were not discussed at the original site plan review.
Yes.
No, I did send you guys off a arborist report in regards to the condition of these trees. I know you got it kind of close to the meeting date. I hope everybody at least was able to browse it quickly.
Yep.
I don't see anywhere any mitigation for the loss of these trees. So I don't know what's planned.
This is a lot of trees.
It's a lot of trees.
And one thing I would...
Go ahead, Karen.
I was just going to comment, having walked over there today, on this site plan, they look small, but these are very large mature trees. I mean, so it's not just number, but it's a lot of really significant trees.
Yes. Wow.
Karen, were you able to see him with the report in hand, or did you get that after you saw these trees? You were on site.
Unfortunately, it was without it in hand.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I took a number of pictures, but again, some had pink tape around them, some had white tape on them, some had yellow paint marks on them, and it was hard to kind of make sense. But I think pretty much everything that I saw, is slated to be removed. So.
Yes, that was my impression.
I don't know what we want to offer the planning board. Certainly, again, I'm a little confused why this wasn't presented originally. with the site
Mhm.
plan. There's no mitigation proposed except for the original few plantings that they had offered.
Mhm. Well, it's hard to see how we can approve that many trees being removed without some mitigation. And that's clearly nowhere in. Do the rest of you feel that way also?
I noticed that the species of tree, there's a lot of Norway maple, and I know that's,
Mhm.
it's not a desirable tree. So that made it a little bit easier to swallow, that they were removing some of these invasive species. I did see some red oaks and black maples and stuff like that. I didn't know if there was any way to, I don't know if they, I know they want to make space. Is there any way to show preferential treatment to native species?
Mhm. Mhm. Good
I
point.
just don't like Norway maples. I don't know if that's a personal opinion, and
Well,
there's not great trees.
yes, that's for sure.
And maybe make it, I know we can't tell them they have to keep all the trees, but what if we said replace the native species with native species, one for one on the natives as opposed to trying to replace all the Norway maples that they're removing. Just an idea.
Do you
I
think that
like it.
all the trees that are proposed to be removed need to be removed?
No, I actually have a pretty big problem with this. The the number of trees that are being removed that are, I mean, they have the silt fence and then they have the clearing limit set further out. If you want to have I guess I'd be inclined to kind of make a fuss about this. They have 4 red oaks that are big trees that are up to the sort of the upper right-hand corner on that diagram.
Mhm. Mhm.
That are, because they're next to the topsoil stockpile proposed, which hasn't happened yet, that's going to compromise them perhaps. So we're going to remove them now anyhow. The justification is sort of along the lines of we didn't like them anyhow and they're not perfect, so let's just get rid of them. It's a wooded lot that's got some natural growth on it, so there are trees that are damaged. There's some that are dead. And they're talking about taking them all down, all of them, really. I mean, there's not, it's not clear that there's anything left in that area that they are going to leave, which is, I don't know. I find that troubling. I mean, it's a big house and a big
Yeah.
lot. They're going out pretty far from that. The Norway maples, I mean,
Yeah.
all kidding aside, I mean, everybody's entitled to them, and they're the one who should hate the most. I certainly agree with that. But in a location like this, where they are simply part of the landscape, cutting down large and relatively robust Norway maples, just because we don't, using that as an excuse, I think is a little thin.
Mhm.
We're not, they have invaded. They're part of our local ecosystem. And on this lot, they've been allowed to grow to be some nice, big, healthy looking trees. So yeah, I'm not sure. Once you get beyond the silt fence, I'm not sure that there's good justification for removing many of those trees at all, or any of them. I'm not sure.
Mhm.
So would you like to, is everybody kind of in agreement with George's take on this? That basically, to the outside of the siltation fence, it's shown that those trees should not be removed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I would
I mean,
explicitly add those ones north of by the topsoil pile as well.
Yeah, you might
Because
name
they're
those.
sort of questionable whether out, the fence sort of ends before you get to that, but.
Yeah.
And can we also say there should be additional mitigation for the ones that are removed from within the footprint of the house and the line?
Well, Yeah, you know, I didn't compare this exactly to the approved site plan, but I believe pretty much everything in that area disturbance was going to be removed.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the limited mitigation that they proposed through the original approval is what we got.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know, Karen, exactly how to
That's
require
fine.
them additional mitigation based on a second look at this. I think if we're coming in saying, don't remove any of those other trees and
Mm-hmm.
live with your original site plan. And I guess we can also say that, live with the original site plan that you got approval for, the original EPOD permit that you got approval for.
Sure, that might do it.
Yes. But we're certainly going to have to see better reasons than we have so far.
Yeah, I mean, that it might be affected by post-construction decline is hardly a reason to, I mean, you know, I might get hit by a bus tomorrow. It doesn't mean that I'm not going to be,
Yeah.
I mean,
Stop the bus line.
stop the buses everywhere. You know, I'm going to hide in the house for the next week. You know, I mean, logic doesn't follow that the trees will automatically die. And if it's a proposed location, you're going to put topsoil, it's next to, you know, 4 of the best, biggest native trees on the entire site, then maybe you don't pile it there.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we're pretty much on the same page, everybody. That we do not approve of the plan as submitted. Basically, abide by the original approved site plan and EPOD permit.
Yep.
And that,
Additional comments about this? No? Okay.
just before we close this, Dennis, I just want to make sure again that nobody in the audience is here to speak on this application. And that if they are, please raise their hand.
Yep.
Don't see anyone, so.
All right. All right, so we'll move on to 9P0220. Teamsters Local 118. Final site plan approval for their 2,617 square foot building addition and expansion of the parking lot at 130 Metro Park.
Brad, if you could let Joe Jacobs in.
Check, check. 1, 2.
You're good, Joe.
All right, Joe, go ahead.
Hello, Joe Jacobs here again. I'm with EDR 274 North Goodman Street in the city of Rochester. The application before you is the Teamsters Local 118. And we previously were here for our preliminary site plan approval, or preliminary site plan application, I should say. And prior, or just after that, there were a couple of comments that were made in recommendation to the planning board. One of them being the look at the reduction of impervious area, A, and then B, to look at any opportunities to add plantings to the frontage of the site.
Mhm.
We have subsequently went to the site plan. They tabled us. And they tabled us because we needed 2 variances. One of them being setback to a property line for drive aisles / parking spaces, which is supposed to be 10 feet in this zone, and we are the existing nonconformance is almost nothing. It's 0.2 feet. And the second one being coverage, impervious coverage. we have received both of those variances, and the setback to drive aisle and parking is pretty self-explanatory. But as part of the variance application and in conformance with the initial comment from the Conservation Board, seeking opportunity for reduction of impervious area or use of pervious pavements, we have removed a certain amount of impervious area, and we actually brought down the impervious percentage from 73 to 69%. And so we were able to carve out areas that weren't being used, and we subsequently provided green space not only for obviously groundwater recharge and stormwater evapotranspiration, but we've also created snow storage areas. So we've addressed that initial comment in that respect. And with regard to the Conservation Board's second comment about seeking opportunities in the front to provide some additional plantings, we've decided to, because of the approach on Metro Park coming towards the building, there's a flagpole, and the approach to the building frontage, existing building frontage, is we didn't want to obscure any part of the building where the sign, the Teamsters logo and badge are. So the eastern portion of the that front yard area, we pretty much I don't want to say discounted, but we eliminated that area in the respect of providing another statement tree or another something that might obscure the frontage or the facade. So, and the flag.
Can I just interrupt you for a real quick second?
Yeah, sure.
I just like, Brett, could you move the screen to show their site plan?
Yeah, the next page.
Next page. There we go. Thanks.
Perfect. And go down.
Down one.
Yeah, right there.
There we go.
All right.
So
Thank you.
we provided or we're showing and I'm looking at the Tilia Cordata on the upper part of the upper half of that page. Our idea was to at least match those two existing lindens to provide a trio of trees. It would be out of the way. It would have an odd number of plantings, and if you look at the site, the 10-inch linden, which is would be center, it would be the larger of the two trees, and then a 6-inch linden on one side, and then a newly planted linden. It would be a nice kind of symmetrical planting. And then inadvertently, we would be required to plant another bush or shrub in the frontage due to some utilities that after the initial site plan submission need to be installed as part of our application. So where that additional utility, which would be a domestic or a fire line, a fire protection water line, that would need, where that's being installed is basically where two existing shrubs are currently. So we have provided all right, you're gonna have to, I'm not a landscape architect, so you're gonna have to bear with me. I think it's an amelanchier, but it's a service berry, nice flowering shrub that kind of anchors that and buffers
Oh, yes. Mhm.
parking, those parking spaces right there. So, instead of going with the, like a typical, like coniferous, like evergreen, we'll get some, seasonal color, some pop. And instead of doing a multi-stem, which we were doing in the back with the river birches, we're just going with a single stem straight up a service berry to keep it from the foliage from migrating into the paved area where there might be people parking. It's more of a maintenance thing. And other than that, in terms of the landscaping and the green space, everything is more or less the same. You can
Okay.
see right there on the as you scroll to the right, we've created a bank of grass where it says reputed location, kind of at the upper portion of the site, the parking area, the new parking area. Yep, right there.
So our comments from the preliminary were: 1, consider additional deciduous shade tree plantings in the front yard area. I think Joe touched on that. And then our other comment was investigate incorporating pervious pavement into the project to help mitigate the loss of green space. So I don't know, Joe, if you took a look at some pervious pavement or not.
We did, and for there's a couple of things that we unfortunately have going against us. One is soils. The installation of a pervious pavement, you obviously need to dewater it. Sorry, and the soils on site are de-soils, and they don't particularly drain very well, which is good because we still have an outlet, which is that stormwater management facility in the back. However, due to shallow grades and the outlet being relatively shallow, the outlet being if you scroll over to the right a little bit more, you can see we're connecting into a swale in the back, which is owned or is under, it's a stormwater easement to the town of Brighton. That because of the relatively low, the low head in this area, any pervious pavement that would have a granular subbase, essentially the water would back up into that pervious pavement subbase, and it might have a potential for freeze thaw, and
Mhm.
in that respect, the pavement will essentially degrade a lot quicker than it would normally would. So to answer the question, Rick, we looked at it and we thought that increasing the green space was more cost effective and from a maintenance standpoint, a longer lasting solution that it would achieve similar benefits.
Mhm. Do we have anything more?
I feel
No?
satisfied that they've addressed the comments that we have from our previous session.
You agree, Susan?
Yeah, I think so. I'm good with this.
David, George?
I'm comfortable with the thought they've put into it and attempting to do what we asked.
Yep, seems reasonable.
All right, I'm with that. And so do we have any comments? Nope. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe.
Yes,
Thanks,
thank you.
Joe.
Thank you, and have a great rest of your week.
All right.
too.
All right. Thank you. And we'll move on to the third and final project, the 9P NB1-20 application of the Baptist Bible Temple and Clover Park Enterprise Properties for preliminary site plan approval to convert the existing church building into high-end office space and construct a two-story, 10,000 square foot building addition at 1075 Clover Street. All right. Comments?
We do have people to present. Matt, are
Good.
you there, Matt?
Yep, I'm here. Hello, everybody.
Hi, Matt. You're on.
All right, great. So 1075 Clover Street, this project, I believe.
Matt, could you just introduce yourself and for the record?
Oh, yeah.
just tell everybody who-
That'd be a good start. I'm before this board so often, I figured they'd remember.
We do know you, but for people who are out in the audience and might be watching.
Yeah.
Sure, Matt Tomlinson, Marathon Engineering. We're at 39 Cascade Drive in Rochester, New York at our office. I want to orient you guys real quickly. Highland Avenue is to the right, which is North Clover Street at the bottom of the page. So right at the intersection, this building has been here for quite some time as part of the town of Brighton. And I believe that this project in a very simplistic form was run under this board's noses prior to our appearing before the planning board at a concept level. One of the things with this project is that it is going to require a use variance for the proposed conversion to office use and a building addition. And so we anticipate, and just so the board knows, we anticipate appearing for preliminary planning board, but being tabled until resolution of the use variance request at the zoning board. So we'll be back a couple of times before the planning board. And if there's anything that I can't answer for you folks tonight, I'd be happy to come back again before we get to final if we get that far with the project. So I just wanted to walk through quickly what we've got going on, and you'll see some numbers next to a lot of these trees that have the black X's on them. And so I don't know if the board has had a chance to visit the site or not, but it's a very nice park-like setting, especially out to the corner of Highland and Clover Street, with a significant number of very large trees out towards the frontage of the property that are in excellent condition. We've worked with Heinrich Fisher, and he also had an arborist that he does some work with come out and do an assessment of the trees, and pretty carefully selected which ones were going to come down. Part of that selection is driven by the species and size and condition of the trees. The other part is to attempt to ensure that the presence to the street of the existing property stays very similar to what it is today. That's very important to the developers, and in their outreach to some of the neighbors and community members that they've been doing in advance of the planning board and zoning board hearings, which includes meeting with the neighbors on the other side of Clover Street, meeting with the neighbors on Council Rock, and also a couple of the folks across Highland in some of the condo buildings. They have heard loud and clear that that's important to those folks as well. So with that lead in, I wanted to just point out a couple of the trees that we're removing. And I don't know if it's possible for me to share my screen or not, but I do have the trees, and I can just go through the numbers, I guess, from mine without sharing that. So tree number one is go ahead.
I was going to say, unfortunately, Matt, you cannot share the screen.
Okay.
So you just have to kind of go off of ours here.
Yeah, no problem. So tree number one here is located in a small landscape island. Yep, highlighted there. That is a pin oak, and a lot of the frontage trees along Clover are pin oak trees. That tree is relatively small and constrained in the root system with and not real healthy. And so one of the things that we looked at was when we originally had designed it, Immediately north of there, there's a 36-inch pin oak, north on the page, immediately to the west. There's a 36-inch pin oak, directly across from the main entrance. So we are going to create a large landscape island around that 36-inch tree, and that 15 inches overshadowed by the two 36 inches on either side. So that's why we're pulling that one down to maximize the drive aisle and the landscape area available for that tree. Number 2 is a small American dogwood. It's under the canopy of that 36-inch pin oak, really not in great shape and not likely to survive for too much longer. Number 3, honey locust. This is one that's driven, it's not in terrible shape, but it's driven by trying to maximize parking behind the buildings and leaving the trees out near the frontage of the property as much as possible without affecting those. 4, 5, and 6 are some Colorado spruce, and 7, all in lawn areas. You can tell that they've had snow piled up against them previously. Again, are in an expanded parking area. 8 is looks like someone had a leftover tree and stuck it there. It's definitely leaning a little bit, not in great shape. Number 9 is a very large spruce tree that is not in great shape. It's got quite a bit of dead wood going up the side of it, and it's in a banked parking area. That may be a tree, depending on condition during when we're taking all the rest of them down, that stays up unless and until the banked parking is required. And then same for number 10, that linden. And when we go to the next site plan page, I'll show you exactly where that falls. But that's a relatively nice tree, that linden tree. And I would say in the best condition of any that we've talked about so far. So that's one we'd like to maintain for as long as possible. And if and when the banked parking needs to be installed, we'll talk about that in a little bit. 11 and 12, which are more out towards the Highland side. On the west side of the main entrance, those are silver maples that have a lot of debris on them. This is outside of the development area, but in talking with the neighbor, which is Mr. Dutton immediately to the west, the owner has relayed to me, or the developer has relayed to me, that he's working with him to add some additional new trees in that area as an additional buffer between his house and the entrance drive. And given the condition of those maples and the amount of dead wood, they do not appear to have much life left in them. And so the intention is to plant some additional shade trees in that area that can grow over time. Callery pears is an invasive species. These are near and proximate to the proposed building addition, which again, when we go to the site plan, you'll see in building the building addition, I think it would impact those trees, and given the species and just the kind of larger size for this species, we felt those wanted to come down. And then the crabapple is an older crabapple, and the spruce in the front would kind of be a standalone tree. So we wanted to remove that to frame and kind of have more of a formal planting plan in this area that somewhat better mimics the park-like setting that we've got wrapping around to the north and to the east. If you guys can go to the site plan real quick, or the landscaping plan, I guess I should say, it's probably about the 4th page in the set. Yeah, one more. Great. So we've got a couple of areas that I wanted to touch on, and then I can open it up for questions. We've got some deadwood pines in the back that's along a hedgerow that we'll be taking out and replanting with some additional evergreen material. We've attempted to provide some shade trees as well as flowering trees within the parking area. The main entrances to the building are in the corner where it says the RA16. Sorry, I was forgetting that you can't see my mouse. Near the corner of where the building addition and the existing building are, back into the parking lot. We've got visitor parking towards the Clover Street side where we've got a couple of trees and some grasses bracketing that existing sidewalk. And then we've got a couple other nodes for the office entrances. As you can see, we're pretty limited grading on the site, putting in a couple of additional oaks bracketing the main entrance out to Highland Avenue, providing some maple, lilac, and some crab apples through the parking lot. They do relatively well with some of the, as far as salt tolerance, and we're maintaining a couple of other crab apples to the rear there. And overall, again, the intention really is to leave the frontages to Highland and to Clover as much existing with some of those really statement trees that are out there, and maintaining that look into the building. I don't know if you have the elevation view of what that building addition wants to look like. It's not in this PDF. It was a separate one as part of the plan set.
I think you were there, Brett. Go back to those elevation drawings.
Yeah, I think it was the first one in the elevation drawings there. Yeah, so just to orient you, that 60-foot addition label on the right-hand side would be the addition out towards Highland Avenue. It really blends well, I think, with the architecture of the existing building. And again, we'll be installing some plants along there. This doesn't reflect the proposed plants, but kind of give the same feel of providing a landscaped front park-like setting to that yard out to the road. I believe one of the comments touched on pervious pavements. We do have some soils out towards Highland that are a little bit sandier in nature. We've done some preliminary soil testing for infiltration rates. Unfortunately, the rear of the property really does not infiltrate well, except in a couple small locations. And we're limited with some pretty minimal connection points. There's no storm sewer on Clover, only up on Highland. But we are proposing to use some pervious pavement in the banked parking areas. This is intended to be corporate office, if you will, and not cubicles stacked on top of each other, but more generous space. And we do not anticipate a very high parking demand. This is not going to be a call center or anything like that. And so the banked parking at the very south end of the site with a small swale behind it, and then the overflow parking at, I'll call it the southwest portion of the site, both of those areas would be intended to be pervious pavement if and when constructed. The remainder of the parking really is in areas that are already paved for the most part. And so the amount of additional impervious outside of the building addition is really minimal compared to the overall 5 acres of the site. And again, that's with the focus of trying to limit the amount of impervious in the front yards and only develop what's developed already with the exception of the building addition. So with that, I'll turn it over for any questions I might be able to answer from the board.
Questions?
Matt, I think one of the big questions that we had earlier was that buffering between the neighbors on to the west and the fact that that parking lot does not meet, I don't think it meets current setback for an office building. It certainly would meet the setback for the church or a residential type of development that would be allowed in a residential district. But when it comes to office, it would not maintain the required setback. Is anything beside a fence proposed for that property line?
Sure. Yeah, great question, Rick. I apologize. I meant to have a picture with it. There's about a 2-foot high retaining wall made of stone that is, so the neighboring properties on Council Rock are higher than ours. And there's a consistent 6-foot wood fence all the way along that property line already. And all of that's owned by the neighbors. So that is very well screened currently through that area. And when we get to the planning board, I'll make sure to have some photos of that so that they can see what that looks like. So the intention would be to leave what's there as screening that's been put up over the years by the neighbors and not to affect that.
So if something were to happen to the neighbor's fence, you aren't providing anything to help your site from any
If
impact to the residential
anything,
property?
yeah, I guess if anything was removed by the neighbors, we would absolutely provide something if necessary. In order to provide any additional screening through there from the existing pavement limits, we'd have to put up something like an 8-foot high fence, which would also require a variance through there, Rick. And I don't know if anyone's been able to visit the site or not, but it's very well screened already.
Mhm. Comments, questions? Yep.
One of the other questions, Matt,
Go ahead.
or one of the things that came up with at the last meeting, the concept is that the Clover Street sidewalk is in pretty bad shape. I don't know if there's any plans as part of this development to repair that sidewalk.
Yeah, if you can scroll down just a little bit, I'll touch on that, Rick. There's sidewalk on the other side of Clover Street, and this sidewalk ends at the south property line of the church with no sidewalk on the east side, or excuse me, on the west side of Clover Street as it continues south. So the intention would be, and this is something that we have to have further conversation with the town and also with the county for, would just be to bring the sidewalk into the property and remove the remainder of it, given that it doesn't go anywhere and is in such poor condition. But that's something that we have not finished hammering out yet.
Yeah, I think that might be a difficult sell.
Mhm.
Yeah, I would say I know that certainly the stretch between Marvin Park and Highland is very well trafficked by pedestrians. So I don't know if you were talking just about removing the part in the southern end of the property, or were you talking about removing all of the sidewalk on Clover Street?
Yeah, just in the southern end, Marvin Park North on the east side of Clover Street, there's a much better sidewalk in much better shape is what it appears. So yes, that would be basically from the driveway where the cursor appears to be now, south would be the area that we would be potentially removing. So that's the driveway directly across from Marvin Park. Sorry, just to orient you.
Mhm.
Another comment from the concept review was green infrastructure techniques. I know you mentioned earlier about some pervious pavement for the bank parking.
Yep.
But
Yeah, so
any other techniques being used? Any rain gardens?
yeah, thanks, Rick. Yes, we'll have two others. We have an infiltration basin in the areas where we found the soils with good percolation rates. That's intended to treat and take all of the roof runoff from the addition, as well as a portion of where this sanctuary or angled building is as well. So that's going to help us achieve our goals of reducing the rate of runoff from the site. So that's a green infrastructure practice, and it'll only have a overflow discharge for a 100-year storm event. It can handle up to a 10-year storm for that impervious, which is going to be great. And then the maintenance and planting of trees. A lot of these islands within the parking will not be curbed, similar to how the existing site is laid out. And so those trees will also give us quite a bit of green infrastructure credit as part of those plantings.
Mhm. Comments, questions from the board? Nothing.
Do we have anything that we want to go back to the planning board with? I don't know how you guys feel. I think that property line along the west portion of the property still concerns me a little bit. with not being able to provide any type of screening other than what the neighbors have already put up. I don't know if that's just something that we want to, just
I
voice
think
our,
if we, yeah, I think if we call the planning board's attention to it and see if they are comfortable with that.
yeah, I think we need to just state the fact that maybe there's a little more investigation along that, see if there's something that can be done. I hate to say, put the burden on the property owners and say, hey, unless you maintain your fence, you're going to have to be looking at this property that no longer is a place of worship, but is now an office building. When they bought the property, they expected a place of worship behind them. They didn't expect an office building if this continues on and gets its use variances. So, and we do have requirements in the code that says you've got an office building against residential. It is the responsibility of that office property to protect those residential properties through proper buffering and screening. So I do think
Rick, if I could talk to that a little bit.
Yeah, sure, please.
Yeah, so there's a couple things out there. Number one, we were required to and will be required to obtain a variance for rear yard lot coverage because we are required to analyze the property and its setbacks and against the underlying zoning. So that is something that I guess kind of cuts both ways. We're not looking to maximize square footage and that kind of thing on the property, but simply convert the use. In addition, the existing facility has a daycare in it that services up to, I believe it's 90 kids. There's several office uses within the building, and those are uses that have been done in conjunction with the religious use of the property. But I think that what will be found by the neighbors, if the use variance is successful, is that the use of this building is going to go down quite significantly without night meetings, without weekend services, without early daycare drop-offs, that kind of thing. So I agree, Rick, we can definitely look into it further, but I want to make sure that the board is aware that of some of these other uses and I think lessening over the long run of some of the impacts of the new use versus the existing uses in that building.
Yeah, man, I don't disagree with your take on that. Again, I'm just looking at from a code standpoint, what we require between a residential property and an office property. And I think that's something that we do still need to investigate and see if there's anything that can be done in regards to that property line. And again, it does fall back to the planning board, but this board can certainly state their position on that.
Mm-hmm.
Unless the board feels that it's being taken care of properly at this point in time.
I think better to cover all the legal bases as you suggest, Rick. Thank you.
So Matt, going back, we will have that comment going to the planning board. I don't know if the board members have any other comments that they want to pass on to the planning board at this point in time. If you're comfortable with what was presented in terms of the landscaping mitigation, the proposed trees that are being removed, the green infrastructure that being proposed.
Yep, Matt, we like it.
Okay, great. That's good. All right, well, thanks everybody for your time. Appreciate that, and we'll work with the planning board to address that west property line. And again, we do anticipate being tabled for preliminary and then having to come back for hopefully preliminary final. So if there are any other items that come up, we can of course always appear before this board again to discuss if we need to.
All right,
Thanks,
thank you, Matt.
Matt, do you have anybody who wants to speak with you?
No, John August was just listening in. I don't believe he had anything that he wanted to add.
Okay.
All right. Do we have an EMC report?
Just before we do that, I don't
Oh,
know if we
sure,
have anybody in the audience who would want to speak in regards to this application. If there is, please raise your hand. I don't see anybody, so
Okay,
we can move on.
all right. So do you have,
We lost you, Mitch.
There's no EMC report.
all right, thank you. Green report, staff report,
No staff report.
new business, old business. All right, let's look at the tree council review. We have quite a few removals here and pretty much in clusters, the Penfield Road cluster where the pines are across the street from each other. So let's deal with those first. Any comments on those or objections to their removal or alternate suggestions? All right.
Quick comment, I think they're all white spruce, not pine.
Right? Are we talking the Penfield Road ones?
Yep.
I know, George, you were looking at those, right? You and Dennis?
Yes.
So you're good for removal and replace all, how many of them? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5?
Yep. And the one at Esplanade is certainly badly damaged.
Yeah, I looked at it this afternoon and yeah, that should be taken out. Do they have any plans to replace it?
According to the report, yes, that was to be replaced also.
Uh-huh, good.
All right, and the 131 Sylvan Road tree. Which, if not dead, is certainly in hospice care.
Yes, all of the Sylvan Road ones are struggling, so.
Yes, I agree. I agree. Do any of you have specific?
Dennis, I lost you.
I was wondering if you about any of the.
I think he asked if any of us have specific comments about any of the trees. I think I just
Okay,
made that up.
thank you.
Thank you.
So basically, all of the trees are to, we agree with the report to remove and replace.
Yes. Do we have anything else before adjourning the meeting? Well, then I'll hear a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All right, seconded, and we are adjourned. Thank
And
you all.
Our next meeting will be October 13th. Everybody think they can make it?
Sure.
Great. Thank you, everybody.
Be well, everyone.
Thank you, Rick.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.